$950 million deal. That girl doesn't even seem to know how to hold a fork properly, Margaret Wellington whispered to her sister-in-law, loud enough for the entire rehearsal dinner table to hear. My poor David, what a disgrace to our family line. Amara Johnson, just 28 years old, sat silently at the end of the mahogany table at Manhattan's most expensive restaurant. Her simple, understated dress stood in stark contrast to the diamonds and ostentatious jewelry adorning the other women of the Wellington family. She never imagined that the pre-wedding dinner would turn into a public session of racial humiliation disguised as family concern. The Wellington mansion was known throughout New York. 3 generations of investment bankers with political connections spanning decades, and a fortune built on privileges they defended as tradition. David, her fiancé of 2 years, had promised that his family would learn to respect her over time. That promise now sounded pathetic. "Tell me, dear," Margaret continued, adjusting her pearl earrings with a venomous smile, "do you have any formal education? Beyond high school, of course." Richard Wellington, the 65-year-old patriarch, cleared his throat uncomfortably but did not intervene. His cold eyes studied Amara as if she were a questionable investment that needed to be liquidated before it caused further losses. "A degree in business administration from Stanford and an MBA from Harvard," Amara replied calmly, cutting a piece of salmon without looking up from her plate. An awkward silence fell over the table. Margaret coughed, visibly irritated at having underestimated the response. "Harvard," laughed Christine, the Wellingtons' youngest daughter, 25. "I bet it was with the diversity scholarship, wasn't it? How cute." David finally shifted in his chair, but his reaction was more embarrassment than indignation. "Christine, please." "No need to defend her, dear," Margaret interrupted, pouring herself more wine. "We all know why she's here. Girls like that always have a very clear goal." Amara placed her cutlery on her plate with surgical precision. Her movements were controlled, but anyone who knew her well would notice the dangerous gleam in her dark eyes. An expression she had perfected in boardrooms where powerful men discovered, too late, that they had underestimated the wrong woman. "And what might that goal be?" she asked, her voice soft as silk but sharp as a blade. Richard leaned forward, his condescending tone echoing decades of unquestioned superiority. "Well, let's not pretend you don't know, my dear. A girl of your background obviously sees an opportunity when she finds one." The entire restaurant seemed to fall silent, even though the other tables continued their conversations as usual. It was as if the universe had paused to watch this moment unfold. Amara picked up her small, discreet purse, her fingers pausing for a moment on the cell phone inside, a device that held the power to destroy not only the Wellingtons, but the entire financial empire they had built on arrogance and systemic racism. But it wasn't time yet. "David," she said, turning to her fiancé who was avoiding her gaze, "do you have something to say?" He played with the engagement ring on his own hand, a nervous sign she had learned to recognize. When he finally spoke, his words were like daggers. Maybe we should talk about this later, love. In private." The betrayal in his voice was instant and complete. After 2 years together, he was choosing the comfort of his privileged family over defending her against blatant racist attacks. Margaret smiled with malicious triumph. David is being sensible. Some people just aren't cut out for this kind of life. Amara rose slowly, her posture straight and dignified, contrasting with the venom that hung over the table. She didn't tremble, she didn't scream, she didn't make a scene. Instead, something far more dangerous happened. She smiled. A smile that didn't reach her eyes. A smile that Christine, years later, would describe in therapy as the moment we knew we had awakened something we shouldn't have touched. For a moment, no one spoke. There was something about the way Amara carried herself, a serenity that only exists in those who have weathered far worse storms and emerged on the other side stronger and more determined. There in front of all those looks of contempt, masked by politeness, she remained steadfast, like someone who holds a secret too powerful to be revealed before the right time. If this story of prejudice and revenge touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to find out how a simple family humiliation would turn into the catalyst for a downfall the Wellingtons would never forget. 3 days after the dinner, David showed up at Amara's apartment with an expression she had learned to decipher after 2 years of relationship. It was the look of someone who had made a cowardly decision and was trying to justify it as reasonable. "My family is concerned," he began, adjusting his tie nervously. "Maybe we should postpone the wedding, just for a few months, to let tempers cool." Amara remained seated on the sofa, watching him with the same icy calm she had shown at the restaurant. Postpone or cancel? "It's not that. It's just that," David bounced back and forth, his hands gesturing defensively. "You don't understand the pressure they put on me. The family bank, our reputation, the clients." "Our clients," she repeated slowly. "Racist clients who can't do business with a family that accepts people like me?" The truth hung in the air like a sentence. David stopped pacing but couldn't bring himself to look her in the eye. That same afternoon, Margaret called Amara at work at Wellington and Associates, a cruel irony she only now understood. As a special accounts manager, Amara had helped her fiancé's own family business close million-dollar deals over the past 2 years. "Honey," Margaret's voice dripped with false sweetness over the phone, "I've been thinking about our little chat at the restaurant. Maybe you should consider other professional opportunities. You understand, right? It would be less awkward for everyone involved." The office was full. Coworkers pretended not to listen, but every word was heard and stored for future breakfast table gossip. "Am I fired?" Amara asked, her voice professional but firm. "Fired is such an ugly word," Margaret laughed, a high-pitched, artificial sound. "Let's call it restructuring. You'll receive generous compensation, of course. Richard is a fair man." Later in the company parking lot, Christine Wellington leaned against Amara's car with a mischievous smile that didn't match her angelic appearance. "My brother told me you two are taking a break," she said, making air quotes with her fingers. "I hope you didn't take it personally. It's just that our family has a certain standard to uphold." Amara opened the car door slowly, her movement deliberate and controlled. "What standard would that be, Christine?" "You know," Christine shrugged, examining her own perfectly manicured nails. "People who fit in, who understand our world, who don't make us look too progressive to our friends at the club." It was at that moment that something changed in Amara's eyes, a subtle but powerful transformation, like the exact moment when ice forms on still water. Christine continued, unaware of the danger she was awakening. "Don't get me wrong, I seem like a lovely person, but lovely doesn't pay the bills for our kind of lifestyle, you know? David needs someone who brings real connections, not just, well, you understand." "I understand perfectly," she replied, her voice soft as silk over steel. "And you? What do you bring to the family besides intolerance and inherited privilege?" Christine's smile faltered for a split second before returning even more venomous. "I bring name, tradition, and the kind of education that can't be bought with scholarships. Things some people will never understand." That night, alone in her apartment, Amara finally allowed the mask to slip. For a few minutes, she cried, not for the humiliation, but for the betrayal of the man who had promised to stand by her through any storm. Then, her eyes still wet, she opened her laptop and accessed a file she had kept carefully organized for over a year. Since she started working at Wellington and Associates, small inconsistencies in the family's financial reports had caught her attention. Richard Wellington was not just a traditional banker. He was a man who used client funds for high-risk personal investments, masking losses with fraudulent transfers between corporate and family accounts. For months, she had documented every irregularity, every suspicious transaction, every accounting lie. Initially out of professional instinct, then out of personal caution, when she began to realize the true nature of the family she was getting involved in. The file contained screenshots, bank statements discreetly photographed during family meetings, recordings of conversations where Richard boasted about his creative methods of financial management, and a network of connections linking the Wellingtons to money laundering schemes dating back a decade. Amara wasn't just a competent account manager, She was a certified auditor specializing in financial crimes, a detail she had never mentioned to David or his family, who saw her only as the black girlfriend who works in the office. Her cell phone vibrated with a message from David. "Can we talk tomorrow? Maybe we can find a solution that works for everyone." She read the message, then looked at the open files on her laptop. For almost 3 minutes, her fingers hovered over the keyboard, as if she were weighing options that no one else in New York City could imagine. Finally, she typed a simple reply. "Sure, let's talk." What the Wellington family didn't know was that every act of contempt, every racial humiliation disguised as family concern, was fueling something far more dangerous than anger. It was fueling the meticulously calculated decision of someone who possessed the exact tools to destroy not only their fortunes, but the entire structure of power and privilege they used to crush people like her.